on blast.
Raptors preseason has basically come to an end, right? They had one more game, I think, tonight, as in Thursday night, but I'm pretty sure most of the regulars aren't playing, right? So basically, preseason ended on Wednesday night in Montreal. There's a lot to digest. Kawhi didn't really shoot well, but he did everything else. He had 7 rebounds, 7 assists. He's a defensive beast. We know that. Danny Green was splashing threes from all over the place. Your boy Kyle Lowry got ejected.
Yeah.
Your boy Kyle Lowry was doing Kyle Lowry things. Mr. Webby, what was your biggest takeaway from either last night's game in Montreal or just in general about the Toronto Raptors coming out of this preseason?
How seamless the transition is to these two new faces on the Raptors in Kawhi and Danny Green. And how Nick Nurse has, and I know it's still the preseason, but how he's kind of brought them into the lineup and what he wants their roles to be. Oh, Carson going deep. Oh, that's a flag. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. What's the score, by the way?
It is 21-6. Good guys.
21-6. Okay.
So I know what I'm really impressed with is how Nick Nurse has amalgamated these two new pieces into the lineup and how it's going to look. I mean, if this looks similar to what they're going to put out there in the regular season, and these are the roles that these two players are going to make, or two roles these players are going to play, I mean, it looks really good for the Raptors. I'm sure most fans out there just want to get the season started to see if this is going to be as good as advertised. Now, I did like it was vintage angry Kyle night in that last one. I think he started off like 0 for 4 with 4 turnovers and then got himself ejected. Now, obviously, hopefully that Kyle doesn't bring that kind of performance to the regular season, but I hope he brings that passion. And you know how excited I am for really old school, angry, petulant Kyle Lowry. And if he can be the tough guy on this team, if he can really be the guy who brings that edge to the Raptors this season,
kind of bully nature.
I really think that would be awesome to see. And I think maybe he doesn't have the biggest year in terms of numbers, but we talked about Jimmy Butler in the locker room, and I don't think that Kyle Lowry is going to let any kind of bullshit happen with any young players or any new players that are in that share that locker room with him. I don't think he'd have to worry about a guy like Kawhi or Danny Green, but for more of the younger players, like, he's going to be a great person to learn from.
Kyle Lowry, though, it's super interesting, right? And a lot of people were talking about, we saw a lot of the beat writers talking about Kyle being Kyle, or, curmudgeon Kyle is back.
I call it Master's hat Kyle.
Well played. I just kind of think Kyle's Kyle, right? And so he's going to argue with refs because that's just what he does, right? In every game. And I don't think he has an off switch. So he's going to drive. He's going to try to get a call, or a call gets made against him, and he's then going to just harass and try to bully that referee. That's just what Kyle Lowry's going to do. And at a certain point, he gets ejected, whatever. We saw Steve Kerr do the same thing, whereas I know Steve Kerr's your boy, but Steve Kerr blatantly said, I don't really want to be here anyways.
Why is Steve Kerr my boy?
Oh, just because while I continue to hate on the Warriors and the fact that Steve Kerr is not a good coach, because anyone could coach the Warriors.
Listen, was Phil Jackson a good coach?
Yes.
Okay, then Steve Kerr is a good coach.
The Warriors are not. The Warriors are more stacked than
100%, 100%. But they've won multiple championships.
That's fair. That is fair. But I mean, like, sticking with the Lowry thing, I'm not bothered by it because I feel like Kyle's going to do this in the regular season. Like, this is just Kyle Lowry, and he kind of got to take the good with the bad. And I think a fired up Kyle Lowry. The reason why I don't think this will blow up is because there's Fred Van. First off, the Raptors are going to be good. So Kyle has no choice but to play ball because they don't really, like, they need him, but they don't need him. You know what I mean? Like, if shit hits a fan, you're plugging in Freddie, who's ready to go anyways, and then you still have DeLon.
Yeah.
And
although the DeLon injury, that wasn't
true. But we know the monster that this Raptors bench can be, and you mentioned your biggest takeaway so far is how seamless the transition's been. Kawhi looks great. And him being healthy is a massive factor. And you know what's funny? So both on Tim and Sid today, it was funny. They were talking about, has there been a shift in the narrative from the fan base? Like, the fan base seems to be really fired up, whereas you go back a couple months ago and people were all rattled that they traded DeRozan.
Right?
Now you fast forward and people seem to be fired up. And It's funny because I got a text from a friend, and it was one of my friends who was super salty about the trade, like super salty, nonstop, so angry. And last night I got a text message and it just said, "Oh, my favorite number is number 2, by the way." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "I thought it was number 10." It's like, no, it's really number 2. So it's kind of weird because Kawhi has like my number now, and I'm like, hold on a second. I'm not letting you off the hook. You're talking all greasy, right? And it's funny because I feel like it represents the fan base in terms of what's going on with the fan base right now, right? And have you kind of noticed that narrative kind of shift now that we're actually seeing Kawhi in uniform and seeing I know it's preseason, but still just what this team can look like a glimpse into what this team can look like.
And I think that it was sure seeing a healthy Kawhi, finding out that he was healthy, that this calf problem doesn't seem to be affecting him this year. But I also think it's the coverage of what the Raptors are going to look like from not just the Canadian media, but the American, international, NBA coverage as well. Getting legitimized by having others say that your team is going to finish in the top 2, top 3 of the conference will go a lot to convince the fan base that this was a good idea to make. And it's almost like these Raptors fans are waking up to the fact that, yeah, you know what? We do have a top 5 player in the NBA on our team. And we are in a weaker conference now that LeBron is gone. And if a couple things go right, we could be in the conference finals and maybe even beat a Boston or a Philadelphia to get to the finals. We've got the right player to do it, and we've got the right system there. We're deep. We're everything that you want a finals contender to be. And it just seemed like it took a couple of months for the Raptors fans to kind of wake up and smell those roses.
Yeah, and realize that, hey, your squad was already nice. You just swapped out an all-star for an MVP candidate.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And on top of that, the other part that I think people are going to be surprised about, right? Because I don't think people really watch San Antonio games like front to back like that. Maybe when they're winning championships, cool. But I don't think people fully know how good Kawhi Leonard is.
Right.
That's the first thing. Second thing is, I definitely don't think people understood how good Danny Green was. And that was a thing that we talked about right away when this trade went down, Webby. We both said, let's not forget about the fact you're adding a whole other starter to your team as well.
Not only a starter, but a guy who fits in so well with what every NBA team is trying to get done. And a guy who can fit into your system really well. A guy that almost you were missing.
Right? Like, you're talking about shooting threes and playing defense, and that's exactly what Danny Green's going to come in and do. And he's a vet with championship pedigree. Like, let's remove I know this might sound crazy, but follow me. Let's just say you still had DeMar and you added in Danny Green. That would have been such a massive pickup for this team. Do you know what I mean? So now you combine that with Kawhi, and it's like, people, don't sleep on Danny Green. He's a key addition to this team. And it's going to be so fun to watch. So glad to see where this Raptors team might go. And the one pause. I'm gonna ask you this to close out this segment here, Webby. Should Raptors fans really be this hype, or should we kind of chill a little bit because it's only the preseason?
No, honestly, this is the best shot that the Toronto Raptors have to make the finals in their history.
I agree, man. I totally
I mean, I know that's kind of crazy to say, but there's no LeBron in this conference anymore, and you've got an MVP candidate on your team. I mean, this is a great opportunity. If you're going to do it, you may as well do it now, right?
For sure. And we'll get a little bit more into the Eastern Conference Finals a little later. We'll do some predictions here for the regular season coming up. But just again, Toronto Raptors season gets underway on Wednesday at home against the Cavs. Friday they play Boston, and then Saturday they're in Washington. So right away, we'll get to know a lot about this Toronto Raptors team.
That Boston game on Friday is going to be great.
Woo! Gonna be lit. And also, just a warning, people, On Blast listeners, there might be something in the works, details to come. Stay tuned. But just letting you know, just throwing that out there, tossing that out there.
On Blast.